The suitcase on the bedroom floor was open. Its black zipper stretched tight against neatly folded navy suits. Ethan did not look up when the front door clicked shut. He did not pause his careful folding of a silk tie. 2 luggage tags dangled from the leather handle. They bore the logo of a luxury resort in Miami. "I was going to leave a letter," Ethan said. His voice was flat. No anger, no grief, no memory of 8 years together. But Chloe thought a clean break was more respectful. To understand how Clara ended up standing in her own hallway, watching her marriage crumble in seconds, we must look back at the quiet storm that had been brewing all morning. The morning had started like any other snowy Tuesday in Chicago. The smell of burnt butter and cinnamon filled the kitchen of the historic red brick house. It was a home Clara's late mother had left her. Outside, wet snow slapped against tall glass windows. Streets turned into gray slush. Inside, Clara sat at the wooden kitchen counter. Her eyes burned. She audited expense reports for the 5th branch of Hayes Bistro. For 8 years, Clara had been the invisible heart of Hayes Bistro. She worked 14 hours a day behind greasy kitchen stoves and mountain-high spreadsheets. She developed every recipe. She calculated every food cost margin down to the cent. She built the operational system that turned a struggling bakery into a booming culinary chain. Yet at every media interview, Ethan introduced her as his sweet wife who loves baking at home. He used cold silence as punishment whenever she asked for a share in the business. He gaslit her into believing she was too fragile, too ignorant to understand corporate strategy. Clara learned to hide her scarred, burn-marked hands under long sleeves. She accepted her role as a ghost in her own life. Now, Ethan stood beside his open suitcase. His phone screen lit up on the nightstand. Messages flooded in from Chloe Sterling. Chloe was the glamorous branding consultant Ethan had hired 3 months ago to modernize the brand. Each notification illuminated her profile picture. Blonde waves, an emerald ring sparkling on her finger. "Chloe makes me feel alive, Clara," Ethan said. He pulled a leather passport cover from his jacket pocket. "She understands vision. She understands scale. Walking into a room with her feels like winning. Walking into a room with you, it just smells like grease and unpaid invoices." The words hit Clara's chest like a blunt blade. Air left her lungs in a sharp gasp. Years of quiet sacrifices collapsed into a single, brutal realization. To Ethan, her devotion was never a virtue. It was a free service he exploited until a shinier option appeared. Before Clara could find her voice, the heavy brass door chime echoed through the hallway. Ethan frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" Clara didn't answer. She walked down the hallway. Her knees trembled beneath her linen apron. She opened the front door. Freezing wind swept in. Raindrops glistened on a charcoal overcoat. Sean Vance did not look like a man who had been betrayed. As a renowned commercial litigation attorney in Chicago, and the estranged husband of Chloe Sterling, his presence commanded instant authority. He carried a heavy leather briefcase. His expression was calm, sharp, unbothered by the storm outside. "Mrs. Hayes," Sean said. His deep voice cut through the quiet house. "I apologize for the intrusion. We have a shared problem that requires immediate attention." Ethan stepped into the foyer. "Vance, what are you doing in my house? This is a private family matter." "It stopped being private an hour ago," Sean replied. He unzipped his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. He placed it on the dark mahogany console table between them. "An hour ago, my forensic team flagged a transaction from Chloe's corporate account. Over the past 90 days, $500,000 from Hayes Bistro's reserve account was transferred to an offshore shell company in Delaware. It is registered under Chloe's maiden name." Ethan's face went pale. The color drained from his lips. "That That was an advance for her branding retainer. A retainer doesn't include exclusive licensing rights to Clara's pastry recipes, Sean continued. His sharp blue eyes locked onto Ethan. Nor does it explain why your name alone appears on the trademark application filed last Friday with the Patent Office. You stripped your wife's name from the intellectual property she created at this very kitchen table. Clara stood frozen between the two men. The cold draft brushed against her skin, but the ice inside her chest was far colder. She looked at the white paper documents spilling out of the folder. There it was in black ink. Her recipes, her operational blueprints, her years of labor, legally repackaged as Ethan's sole property. Ethan stepped toward her. His voice dropped into that familiar, soothing tone he used whenever he wanted to manipulate her. Clara, listen to me. This is just corporate restructuring. It's for our future. Chloe knows how to pitch this to national investors. Once the franchise deal closes, we'll be set for life. Don't let this stranger ruin what we built. What we built. The phrase echoed in Clara's mind, hollow and absurd. He hadn't built anything. He had carried the tray while she baked the bread. He had signed the press releases while she balanced the ledgers. The oven timer in the kitchen suddenly went ting. The sharp, metallic chime shattered the heavy silence in the foyer. Clara looked down at her right hand. A pale scar ran across her knuckle, a burn mark from the commercial deck oven during their first year of business. She traced the mark with her thumb. Then she slowly untied the strings of her linen apron. She let it drop onto the chair beside her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't hurl the glass vase on the table at Ethan's head. The burning rage inside her condensed into a crystal-clear, icy resolve. Clara walked to the console table. She pulled the manila folder toward herself. She closed it with a soft, decisive snap. She looked up, meeting Ethan's desperate eyes, and then turned her gaze to Sean Vance. "It is not your money, Ethan," Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but it vibrated with a steady, unshakable power that filled the room. "And this ledger has only just begun." The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind Ethan. His heavy boots crunched against the icy porch steps outside. The metallic click of the gate signaled his departure. Soon, the low rumble of his car engine faded into the quiet Chicago night. Inside the hallway, the hum of the old refrigerator filled the silence. Clara stood alone under the dim amber light of the foyer lamp. She turned toward the oval mirror hanging on the wallpapered wall. The pale glass reflected a stranger. Her long, dark hair hung in limp, unstyled strands over her shoulders. Her skin looked dull, drained by years of midnight accounting under harsh fluorescent bulbs. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, unmistakable marks of endless 14-hour workdays. Her hands, resting against her sides, were calloused and dotted with faint pink burn scars from hot deck ovens. Clara walked into the bathroom. She turned the brass faucet. Freezing water gushed into the porcelain basin. She cupped her hands and splashed cold water onto her face again and again until her skin stung. She wiped her eyes with a coarse white towel. She opened the vanity drawer. She picked up a pair of heavy steel tailoring shears. The metal felt cold, heavy, and solid in her trembling palm. She gathered her long hair in one hand. Without a single moment of hesitation, she squeezed the steel blades together. Crunch! Thick locks of hair fell into the white sink. She cut again and again, watching her past fall away in dark heaps. She shaped her hair into a sharp, chin-length bob that framed her jaw. She picked up the grease-stained linen apron she had worn for years and tossed it into the trash bin beneath the counter. Clara walked to her wardrobe. She reached past the faded oversized sweaters and pulled out a structured, charcoal gray blazer she had bought years ago but never worn. She slipped her arms through the silk lining. The heavy wool fabric rested firmly against her shoulders. It felt like armor. Looking at her new reflection, a bitter truth crystallized in her mind. Her years of quiet sacrifice were not an act of love. They were an act of self-neglect. Her silence had handed Ethan the weapons he used to erase her. Today, the victim died. She took full, unyielding responsibility for her own life, her own choices, and her own future. The next morning, the smell of roasted espresso beans and wet asphalt filled a quiet coffee shop in downtown Chicago. Raindrops trickled down the tall glass windows, blurring the gray traffic on LaSalle Street. Clara sat at a small oak table in the corner. Across from her, Sean Vance adjusted his dark tie and opened his leather notebook. He slid a white checkbook across the polished wood. I have instructed my firm to cover all legal expenses for your divorce and corporate litigation against Ethan, Sean said, his voice calm and authoritative. You won't have to worry about a single dollar. Clara looked at the blank check. She slid it back across the table with 2 fingers. No, Sean, Clara said. Her voice was quiet, clear, and steady. I appreciate the gesture, but I am not accepting charity. Sean raised an eyebrow. It is not charity, Clara. It is leverage. If I swap Ethan's emotional control for your financial rescue, I remain a passenger in my own life, Clara replied, looking straight into his sharp blue eyes. I spent 8 years in the back seat. From today on, I drive. Sean stared at her for a long second. The tension between them held still. Then, a slow, genuine smile touched the corners of his lips. He closed the checkbook and slid it back into his breast pocket. Fair enough, Mrs. Miller. How do you propose we structure this? A strategic partnership of mutual benefit, Clara said. She opened her leather briefcase and laid 3 neat stacks of paper on the table. I possess 8 years of raw internal ledgers, hidden bank transfers, and inventory receipts from Hayes Bistro. I can provide the forensic paper trail your team needs to expose Chloe Sterling's fraudulent corporate filings. In exchange, you provide me with specialized legal counsel on marital asset division under Illinois state law. Sean picked up the top folder. Deal. Clara tapped the second document in black ink. This is a copy of our postnuptial agreement from 4 years ago. Sean scanned the pages. Ethan's lawyers drafted this to protect his corporate shares in case of separation. Yes, but Ethan made a fatal mistake, Clara explained, pointing her finger at a specific clause near the bottom. When Ethan expanded Hayes Bistro to its 3rd location, he lacked commercial credit. He convinced me to put up this house, my mother's sole legacy, as collateral for the bank loan. Under Illinois marital property law, using a non-marital asset to secure business debt commingles the asset. That legally transforms the entire franchise revenue stream into a marital asset subject to 50-50 division. Sean's eyes widened slightly as he read the clause again. He signed this without realizing he opened his entire corporate structure to your claim. He didn't read the fine print because he thought I was just baking pies in the kitchen, Clara said. She opened her laptop and brought up a black terminal window filled with lines of code. For 8 years, Clara had used a custom Python script she wrote herself to calculate daily food cost margins, raw ingredient wastage, and supplier pricing across all 5 branches. Ethan had revoked her company credit cards the night before, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. The software ran on a private cloud server registered under her maiden name, Clara Hale. Clara rested her finger over the enter key. Tap. With a single keystroke, Clara revoked Hayes Bistro's software access key. The impact hit the business like a silent sledgehammer. By Thursday afternoon, total chaos erupted across all 5 branches of Hayes Bistro. Kitchen managers couldn't calculate raw ingredient orders. Flour, butter, and premium meats sat unsorted on loading docks. Food cost margins spiked by 40% in 48 hours. Line cooks burnt expensive steaks and pastries because portion control metrics were locked behind an encrypted screen. Customers flooded review pages with angry complaints about cold food, incorrect bills, and endless wait times. Ethan's name flashed on Clara's phone screen 17 times throughout the evening. When she did not answer, a barrage of text messages flooded in. "You are destroying my business." One text read, "You are a cold, vindictive monster. You will rot in hell for this." Clara sat by her living room window, sipping hot herbal tea. She watched the glow of her phone screen. Her pulse remained calm. Her heart did not race. She felt no urge to scream, no desire to explain herself or ask for forgiveness. The emotional chains Ethan had wrapped around her mind over 8 long years snapped, one by one, into dust. On Friday morning, Clara walked up the wide granite steps of the Chicago Department of Business Affairs. The air inside the high-ceilinged hall smelled of old paper, ink, and lemon floor wax. She sat at a wooden desk, picked up a black pen, and filled out the incorporation forms in neat, precise script. She paid the filing fee with her remaining personal savings. 10 minutes later, the clerk pressed a heavy red stamp onto the crisp white paper. Clara picked up the official document. The bold black letters at the top read, "Hale's Kitchen, LLC." Clara stepped out onto the granite plaza outside. The freezing winter wind rushed past her cheeks, tossing her newly cut hair around her jaw. She held the document tight against her chest. She looked up at the gray Chicago sky, drew a deep, icy breath of fresh air into her lungs, and smiled. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel glittered under massive crystal chandeliers that cast a warm, golden light across the room. The air inside was thick with a heady mix of expensive perfume, seared filet mignon, roasted garlic, and the sharp, effervescent tang of vintage champagne. 300 guests filled the round mahogany tables, dressed in tailored tuxedos and sweeping silk evening gowns. Heavy gold velvet drapes hung from the tall arched windows, blocking out the freezing Chicago wind outside. Flashbulbs popped continuously near the entrance. Photographers shouted names as Chicago's business elite and real estate moguls stepped onto the red carpet for the Hayes Bistro National Franchise launch gala. The event was advertised as a high-profile fundraiser for Feeding Future, a well-known charity dedicated to providing warm, nutritious meals to low-income public school children across the city. Ethan stood near the edge of the stage, holding a crystal flute of pale champagne. He wore a custom black Italian tuxedo with satin lapels. His dark hair was slicked back with scented pomade. He laughed loudly, tossing his head back as he gestured toward a group of wealthy franchise investors. Beside him stood Chloe Sterling. She wore a backless emerald green silk dress that rustled with every step she took. Her golden waves cascaded over her bare shoulders. A heavy diamond necklace sparkled brightly against her collarbone. She held a glass of red wine, flashing a brilliant white smile for a local television camera. 3 weeks earlier, Chloe had personally mailed a gold-embossed invitation to Clara's home address. It was a calculated, petty provocation. Chloe wanted Clara to sit in a dark back row. She wanted Clara to watch Ethan's public coronation. She wanted Clara to see her 8 years of sweat and labor erased by a younger, glossier face. Clara did not throw the invitation away. She accepted it. At precisely 7:30 in the evening, the heavy double oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Clara walked in. She wore a floor-length, high-neck black silk column dress. The cut was minimalist, sharp, and flawlessly tailored to her frame. Her new chin-length bob was styled straight, framing her neck and sharp, clean jawline. She wore no sparkling diamond necklaces, no gold bracelets, only her mother's simple platinum wedding band on her right hand. She held her head high. She walked with a quiet, unhurried poise that made heads turn as she passed the crowded tables. Beside her walked Sean Vance. His tall frame was clad in a dark charcoal tuxedo. His presence added a cold, formidable gravity to her side. They did not look like a bitter ex-wife and a lawyer seeking petty revenge. They looked like a unified front of absolute, uncompromising authority. Clara walked down the center aisle. Her black heels made soft, rhythmic clicks against the polished marble floor. Chloe noticed her first. The bright smile on Chloe's face froze for a fraction of a second. She quickly smoothed her green silk dress and glided across the room, her eyes fixed on Clara. She intercepted Clara near the entrance to the VIP lounge area, holding her champagne flute like a polished trophy. "Clara," Chloe whispered softly, her voice dripping with condescending pity. "I am genuinely surprised you actually showed up. I thought coming here might be far too painful for a woman like you. Look around this room. Clara, this is Ethan's true world now. He needed a real partner who belongs on a red carpet. He didn't need a tired woman who smells like cooking grease and burnt flour." Clara stopped walking. She looked down at Chloe's sparkling diamond necklace. Then she looked directly into Chloe's eyes. Clara's expression remained completely serene, unbothered, and cold. "A $3,000 silk dress cannot cover an insolvent balance sheet, Chloe," Clara said quietly. Her voice was smooth, clear, and perfectly audible over the low murmur of the crowd. "And a stolen recipe does not make you a chef." Chloe's eyes narrowed into tight slits. Her manicured fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass until her knuckles turned pale. Before she could spat back a reply, the heavy house lights inside the ballroom dimmed twice. The soft chime signaled the start of the official presentation. Ethan stepped up the stairs onto the main stage. He approached the polished dark wood podium. A massive projection screen behind him lit up, displaying the bold logo of Hayes Bistro framed by bright photographs of smiling children holding meal trays. A wave of loud applause echoed through the cavernous room. Clara walked to the third row. She took her assigned seat directly beside Sean Vance and two men in tailored dark suits, senior forensic auditors from the Chicago Regional Office of the Internal Revenue Service. Ethan cleared his throat and adjusted the silver microphone. "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed loudly through the overhead speakers. "Tonight, we celebrate vision. We celebrate growth, passion, and heart." Ethan continued his speech, his chest puffing out beneath his satin lapels. "When I founded Hayes Bistro, I had a simple dream," he declared, spreading his hands wide toward the crowd. "I wanted to bring authentic, handcrafted warmth to every neighborhood. And tonight, with our new franchise expansion, that dream goes national." Applause erupted across the ballroom. Franchise investors at the front tables cheered, raising their glasses high. On stage, Chloe beamed, clapping her delicate hands together while flashing another radiant smile for the photographer standing near the footlights. From her seat in the third row, Clara watched Ethan's performance with cold detachment. She remembered the freezing winter nights she had spent alone in the kitchen of their first location, her hands raw from scrubbing greasy pans, her back aching as she calculated flour shipments line by line. Ethan had never been there at 3 a.m. He had never swept the flour off the floor. He had only shown up when the sun was high and the cameras were rolling. Sean leaned in slightly toward Clara. His shoulder brushed against hers, solid and steady. "The IRS agents have verified the cross-referenced ledger entries," he murmured, his voice barely audible under the din of clapping hands. "The moment Ethan yields the stage to the charity board, the subpoena serves." Clara nodded slowly. Her heart beat with a slow, measured rhythm. She felt no sudden rush of anxiety, no trembling in her hands, no lingering urge to run away. The years of quiet fear had evaporated completely, replaced by the calm precision of an accountant reviewing a finalized balance sheet. On stage, Ethan lowered his hands, soaking in the final echoes of applause. And now, Ethan announced, his voice dipping into a practiced, somber tone, "It is my distinct honor to invite Dr. Lillian Shaw, chairwoman of Feeding Future, to join us on stage as we announce our corporate endowment." Dr. Lillian Shaw, an elegant woman with silver hair and a sharp, uncompromising posture, stepped toward the podium. The crowd quieted down, expecting a glowing speech of gratitude. Clara folded her hands neatly in her lap. She looked up at the projection screen above the stage. The bright white light washed over her face, highlighting her sharp profile and the calm, unshakable peace in her eyes. The stage was set. The audience was seated. The final curtain was about to rise. The heavy silence inside the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel was deafening. The low hum of the air conditioning and the faint clinking of crystal glasses died down completely. Dr. Lillian Shaw stood behind the dark mahogany podium. The bright overhead stage lights caught the glint of her neat silver hair and reflected off her reading glasses. She stood tall, her posture rigid and unyielding as she looked out over the crowd of 300 wealthy donors, journalists, real estate moguls, and franchise investors. Ethan stood 2 paces behind her on the right side of the stage. His custom black Italian tuxedo looked hand-tailored and sharp. His broad smile was fixed, bright, and polished for the cameras. Beside him, Chloe Sterling clapped her manicured hands softly, the heavy gold bracelets on her wrist jingling. Her emerald green silk gown caught the spotlight, rustling gently against the wooden floorboards. Dr. Shaw cleared her throat. Her deep, resonant voice echoed through the high-end sound system, cutting through the stillness like a cold steel blade. Tonight, Feeding Future was scheduled to accept a major corporate endowment from Hayes Bistro. Dr. Shaw began, her voice steady and entirely devoid of warmth. However, effective 4 o'clock this afternoon, our board of directors voted unanimously to terminate all financial partnerships with Mr. Ethan Hayes and his associated corporate entities. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. The polite clapping from the front tables stopped instantly. Shocked murmurs broke out across the round mahogany tables. People leaned in, whispering behind their hands, eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan's broad, handsome smile froze. The healthy color drained from his face in a single second, leaving his skin a pale, sallow gray under the harsh stage lights. His throat moved in a hard swallow. He took a hasty step toward the podium, his knuckles turning white as his hands gripped the polished wooden edges. "Dr. Shaw, excuse me, there must be some terrible mistake," Ethan stammered, his voice straining to sound calm and charming. "This is a celebratory launch event." "There is no mistake, Mr. Hayes," Dr. Shaw interrupted, her sharp tone slicing through his protest without hesitation. An independent forensic audit conducted over the past 72 hours revealed that $200,000 in restricted charity funds, money specifically raised to buy warm meals for underprivileged public school children, were redirected. The funds were wired directly into a private media consulting firm registered under the maiden name of Ms. Chloe Sterling. The giant projection screen behind the stage flickered once, twice, and went black. The bright, colorful photographs of smiling children holding lunch trays vanished entirely. In their place, high-resolution digital scans filled the 30-foot display. Bank ledger statements, wire transfer receipts, canceled checks, and cross-referenced cash flow spreadsheets. The stark black numbers printed against the white background were clear, massive, and completely undeniable. Flashbulbs began popping wildly across the ballroom. News reporters surged forward from the side aisles toward the foot of the stage, raising digital voice recorders and long microphones. Television cameras zoomed in on the damning numbers projected high above the crowd. Ethan spun around toward the screen. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "This is fake. This is a fabrication." Ethan screamed, his voice cracking loudly through the overhead microphone. His face flushed a dark, angry crimson. He pointed a shaking, accusing finger down into the third row, pointing directly at Clara. "She did this. That woman, right there. That is my bitter ex-wife. She is vengeful, she is mentally unstable, and she forged those documents to destroy my reputation." The room shifted. Heads snapped toward the third row. Dozens of camera lenses spun around to focus on Clara. Clara did not flinch. She did not cover her face. She did not blink under the blinding glare of the camera lights. Slowly, deliberately, Clara stood up from her leather chair. Her black silk column dress fell in clean, flawless lines around her frame. She smoothed the fabric over her hips with a steady hand. She stepped into the center aisle, holding her chin high. She walked toward the front of the stage with a calm, unhurried, and regal posture. "I am not your ex-wife, Ethan," Clara said. She did not shout, yet her voice was smooth, quiet, and possessed a crystal-clear, unshakable authority that echoed through every corner of the silent ballroom. "I am a 50% owner of Hayes Bistro's marital assets. And those are not forged documents. Those are certified banking records verified by the Internal Revenue Service and the state of Illinois." Chloe took 3 frantic steps backward on the stage. The arrogant polish on her face shattered completely. Her golden waves were disheveled, and her cheeks were drained of all color as she clutched her green silk dress. She grabbed Ethan's arm, her voice shrill, high-pitched, and laced with hysterical panic. "You told me she was stupid." Chloe shrieked, her voice picking up clearly on the podium microphone. "You promised me she was just a pathetic cook who never read legal documents. You swore to me the franchise accounting was completely clean." "Shut your mouth, Chloe," Ethan hissed, violently shoving her hands off his sleeve. "You were the one who demanded the private consulting retainer. You were the one who said charities never audit their line items. Because you told me you own the company outright." Chloe screamed back, tears smearing her dark mascara down her cheeks. "You lied to me." The ballroom fell into a dead, suffocating silence. The 300 guests, the journalists, and the livestream broadcast cameras listened in stunned awe as the two culprits turned on each other. Their panicked arguing echoed loudly through the sound system, exposing every lie, every scheme, and every theft in their own words. The polished mask had not just fallen, it had shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. From the back of the ballroom, the heavy oak doors creaked open. 4 tall men walked down the center aisle. 2 wore tailored dark suits, special agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, accompanied by 2 uniformed Chicago police officers. Their heavy leather boots clicked firmly against the polished marble floor. Sean Vance stepped forward from the front row. He handed a thick blue legal folder to the lead FBI agent. The agent nodded once, walked up the carpeted stage stairs, and stopped directly in front of Ethan and Chloe. "Ethan Hayes, Chloe Sterling," the lead agent announced, his deep voice carrying across the quiet room. "We hold federal warrants for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, tax evasion, bank fraud, and embezzlement of charitable funds. You have the right to remain silent." Steel handcuffs glinted brightly under the crystal chandeliers. The sharp, metallic click-clack of the cuffs locking around Ethan's wrists echoed across the silent stage. Flashbulbs erupted like a thunderstorm. Photographers captured every second of the humiliation. As the officers turned him around, Ethan looked over the heads of the shouting reporters. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and overflowing with terrified tears. He locked eyes with Clara, standing calmly in the aisle below. "Clara, please." Ethan sobbed, his voice raw, desperate, and cracking. "Please help me. Tell them it's all a misunderstanding. You know me. You know, I never meant to hurt anyone. Remember our 8 years together. Please, Clara." Clara stood still in the center aisle. She looked up at Ethan, not with burning hatred, not with petty anger, but with a deep, quiet, and profound pity. She saw a man who had traded his integrity for cheap applause, a man who had mistaken her quiet devotion for weakness, a man now crushed under the weight of his own greed. "I remember everything, Ethan," Clara said softly, her words calm and absolute. "And that is why I am finally letting the truth speak for itself." The officers gripped Ethan and Chloe by their arms, leading them down the side stairs, past the blinding flashes of news cameras, and out through the heavy steel service exit. The ballroom remained motionless. The heavy silence lingered for a long moment before Dr. Lillian Shaw stepped back to the microphone to announce that Hale's Kitchen and Sean Vance had pledged to fully replace the missing $200,000, so the children's meal program could begin construction on Monday. Clara turned around slowly. The freezing winter storm raged outside against the tall glass windows, blowing snow across the Chicago streets. But inside her chest, a warm, unshakable, and absolute peace settled into her soul. She drew a deep, clean breath of fresh air into her lungs, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the exit, her steps light, steady, and entirely free. Without Clara's quiet accounting and operational oversight, Hayes Bistro collapsed in a matter of weeks. The 5 restaurant locations descended into total, unrecoverable chaos. Kitchens ran out of basic ingredients like butter, cream, and high-grade flour. Food cost margins surged completely out of control. Supplier invoices sat unpaid in dusty trays, and angry local vendors refused to deliver fresh produce to the loading docks. Customers flooded online review pages with hundreds of bitter complaints, citing burnt pastries, cold soups, missing orders, and rude service from overworked staff. The franchise board revoked the company's expansion rights, and the bank froze all corporate checking accounts. Before the dirty Chicago winter snow melted into spring slush, Hayes Bistro filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Meanwhile, behind the cold concrete walls of the Cook County Jail, the self-serving alliance between Ethan and Chloe disintegrated completely, faced with heavy federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and embezzlement charges. Chloe wasted no time in protecting her own skin. Through her criminal defense attorney, she offered prosecutors full, unrestricted access to her personal cloud backups. She handed over encrypted voice notes, text messages, and internal emails that proved Ethan was the mastermind who directly instructed her to create fake consulting invoices to siphon money from the charity. Ethan retaliated immediately. From his holding cell, he surrendered hidden bank records showing that Chloe had used the stolen charity funds to purchase $5,000 designer handbags, pay her personal PR team, and place a heavy cash deposit on a luxury high-rise condo in downtown Chicago. Each of them eagerly traded damning evidence against the other, desperate to secure a lighter prison sentence. Together, their mutual greed and cowardice built the prosecution's case far faster and more thoroughly than federal investigators could ever have done on their own. 5 months after the disaster at the Drake Hotel Gala, the final divorce hearing took place at the Cook County Circuit Court. The air inside the quiet courtroom smelled of old oak polish, heavy paper files, and faint floor wax. The high-ceilinged room was still, save for the ticking of the wall clock. The judge signed the final decree with a sharp press of his black pen, officially dissolving the 8-year marriage. Under the binding terms of the settlement, Clara received full, unencumbered ownership of her mother's historic red brick home. She was awarded complete control of her independent company, Hale's Kitchen LLC, alongside full repayment for all unpaid recipe royalties and a substantial 50% share of the remaining marital assets. Ethan waived any and all future claims to her culinary creations, software codes, or trademarks. As the bailiff announced the court adjournment, Ethan's defense attorney asked for a brief moment. Ethan stood near the defense table. He looked remarkably smaller than he had in the glittering ballroom 5 months ago. He had lost noticeable weight. His expensive, dark suit hung loose and wrinkled on his narrow shoulders. He wore no pomade in his dull, thinning hair, and deep, dark circles hollowed his pale eyes. Sean Vance stepped toward Clara, offering to accompany her out to the hallway. But Clara raised a gentle hand. "It is all right, Sean," she said softly. "I will speak to him." Clara walked across the polished hardwood floor, her heels clicking softly and evenly in the quiet room. She stopped a few feet away from Ethan. Ethan looked up at her with wild, bloodshot eyes. "I know you hate me, Clara," he rasped, his voice thin, dry, and hollow. "I do not hate you, Ethan," Clara replied calmly. Her voice was smooth, quiet, and entirely devoid of anger or bitterness. The absolute neutrality in her voice seemed to shatter him far more than a screaming match ever could. Ethan took a shaky step forward, his hands trembling at his sides. "Then help me, please, Clara. Tell the federal prosecutors I didn't understand the financial structure. Tell them I was confused by the corporate jargon. They will listen to you. If I go to federal prison, my life is completely over." "You signed the wire transfers, Ethan," Clara said, her tone steady, clear, and unyielding. "You stripped my maiden name from my own pastry recipes. You tried to sell my life's work using a forged agreement. Which specific part of that did you not understand?" Ethan rubbed a trembling hand over his gaunt face, his eyes welling with desperate tears. "Chloe pushed me," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "She made everything feel urgent. She made me feel like I was destined for bigger, grander things than a neighborhood bakery. You left me because she made you feel alive," Clara said, looking directly into his sunken eyes without flinching. "Now you want me to save you because she made you feel reckless. At what point, Ethan, do you finally take responsibility for your own choices?" Ethan stood completely speechless. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His shoulders slumped forward. He looked past Clara toward the double wooden doors at the back of the courtroom, where Sean Vance stood patiently waiting, holding 2 warm paper cups of coffee. "Is he waiting to celebrate your victory?" Ethan asked bitterly, his jaw tightening. "He is waiting because we are having lunch," Clara answered simply. "This divorce hearing was a legal appointment, Ethan. It is not a holiday." "You really replaced me with him," Ethan muttered, shaking his head with a hollow, self-pitying chuckle. Clara looked at the man she had poured 8 years of her youth and labor into. She felt no lingering malice, no burning desire for petty revenge, only the quiet, unshakable clarity of a woman who had stepped out of the shadows. "No, Ethan," Clara said softly, her words firm and echoing in the quiet space between them. "First, I chose myself. That is why I am finally able to stand beside someone who knows the difference between a real partnership and mere possession." Clara turned on her heel and walked toward the exit. She did not look back when Ethan called her name in a broken whisper. She pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out of the courtroom. Bright spring sunshine flooded the granite steps outside the courthouse. The cool morning breeze smelled of green leaves, fresh asphalt, and blooming tulips along the Chicago sidewalk. Sean stepped forward and handed her a warm cup of coffee. Clara took a slow sip, felt the heat spread through her hands, drew a deep, free breath of fresh air into her lungs, and walked down the steps into the light. 1 year later, the late afternoon sun over Chicago painted the city skyline in warm, liquid gold. The towering glass skyscrapers and stone facades were bathed in the soft, honeyed glow of the golden hour. High above the bustling streets, on the rooftop garden of Hale's Kitchen, LLC, a cool summer breeze rustled gently through long rows of fresh basil, dark green rosemary, and sweet, icy mint plants. The air up here was rich, thick, and wonderfully fragrant with the scent of baking butter, warm cinnamon, roasted garlic, and damp, rich potting soil. Hale's Kitchen had grown from a single modest restaurant into a thriving, highly respected culinary brand across the Midwest. Clara had built her entire business model on total transparency, fair living wages, and ethical local sourcing from small family farms. Within her busy commercial kitchens, she had created a specialized culinary training program. The initiative offered stable employment, fair financial literacy workshops, and personal mentorship to women who were actively rebuilding their lives after leaving abusive, controlling, or emotionally manipulative marriages. Clara's personal journey was no longer a tragic tale about betrayal and loss. It had transformed into a beacon of quiet resilience, unshakable self-worth, and tangible, self-made success. She no longer hid her scarred, burn-marked hands under heavy long sleeves. She wore crisp, short-sleeved chef coats with quiet pride. She viewed every pale, raised scar on her skin as an honorable badge of hard labor, survival, and ultimate personal triumph. Sean Vance stepped out onto the rooftop patio, holding 2 heavy glasses of iced herbal tea. He wore a crisp white linen shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark, tailored trousers. He walked across the weathered cedar deck to where Clara stood near the planter boxes. She was looking out over the shining glass towers and the deep, shimmering blue expanse of Lake Michigan stretching into the horizon. Over the past 12 months, their relationship had flourished with quiet, natural, and effortless grace. There was no desperate urgency between them, no dramatic grand gestures, no needy games, and no toxic emotional dependency. Sean never tried to direct her growing company, never offered unsolicited advice on her menu, and never treated her as a fragile damsel requiring rescue from the world. They were 2 mature, self-contained, and accomplished adults walking side by side as true equals. They respected each other's boundaries, sharp professional minds, and absolute personal independence. Sean handed her a crystal glass. The ice cubes clinked softly against the clear glass rim in the quiet evening air. The quarterly revenue report for your 3rd Chicago location came in from your CPA this afternoon, Sean said, his deep voice smooth, steady, and filled with genuine pride. You exceeded your conservative financial projections by 22%. Clara took a slow sip of the cold, sweet tea. Her lips curved into a soft, confident smile that reached her eyes. I told you my inventory and food cost algorithm was completely foolproof. I never doubted your numbers for a single second, Clara, Sean replied, looking down at her with steady, warm admiration. I stopped doubting your power the very moment you closed that manila folder on your console table. Sean reached into his dark jacket pocket and pulled out a small, velvet-lined mahogany box. He did not drop to one knee with dramatic flair, nor did he make a loud, performative public spectacle. He simply opened the smooth wooden box and held it between them under the soft golden evening light. Inside rested a simple, flawlessly cut platinum band. Tucked discreetly and permanently inside the inner curve of the polished ring was a tiny, thin strip of faded linen, a small piece cut from the very first canvas apron Clara had worn when she opened the doors of Hale's Kitchen. Clara, Sean said, his sharp blue eyes looking directly and deeply into hers. I am not standing here to offer you a rescue because you saved yourself long before I met you. I am not standing here to promise you a life without storms or challenges. I am standing here to ask if you will build ordinary, honest, and quiet mornings with me. Nothing about your company, your name, your ambition, or your complete freedom will ever change. I love the woman you fought so hard to become." Clara looked down at the ring, sparkling brightly under the golden sunlight. She looked at the tiny piece of faded linen embedded inside the platinum band, a quiet, permanent nod to her honest labor, her physical scars, and her long, painful journey out of the dark. A single clear tear slipped silently down her cheek, but it was not born of grief, anger, or past trauma. It was a tear of absolute, unshakable, and profound peace. Standing in the warm, golden glow of the evening sun, she felt no lingering bitterness toward Ethan, no unresolved anger toward Chloe, and no regret for the 8 years she had given away in silence. The past was a closed ledger, fully balanced, audited, and settled forever. She had stopped playing the victim. She had stopped blaming others for her choices. She had taken full, unyielding accountability for her own happiness. She stood tall, proud, free, and completely whole. Clara reached out her hand and gently took the ring from the mahogany box. She slid the smooth platinum band onto her ring finger, feeling the weight of the metal against her skin. "Yes, Sean," Clara said, her voice clear, steady, and radiant in the quiet evening air. "I will build those mornings with you, but I am still keeping full, unquestioned control of our household ledgers." Sean broke into a rich, warm, and genuine laugh that echoed softly across the quiet rooftop garden. He pulled her gently into his arms, resting his chin lightly against her hair under the glowing sky. Below them, the great city of Chicago hummed with evening energy. Lake Michigan glinted like a vast sheet of liquid brass under the setting sun. Clara stood firmly in the light, her head held high, holding the hand of her equal partner, ready to greet a bright, quiet, and limitless tomorrow. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. Please like, share, and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Hope to see you on the next page.